Nonsensical. Boris Sloppily pulls strings scandal with thirst of praise, Rayner put on Docket. Boris Johnson is struggling to repress the UK backlash over his defence of a ruling party lawmaker who broke lobbying rules, as even typically friendly newspapers took aim at his ruling Conservative Party. The British Prime Minister on Monday refused to apologise for his decision last week to tear up parliamentary rules on standards rather than accept the suspension of Owen Paterson, a Tory MP found guilty of paid advocacy. Johnson then missed an emergency debate in the House of Commons, raising anger from his own side and opponents benefiting in the polls from the fallout. Glasgow, Scotland. Boris Johnson rushed back to the United Nations Climate Summit on Wednesday in a last-ditch effort to persuade countries to make more meaningful pledges to curb global warming. But his splashy return to the global stage was all but eclipsed by a mushrooming scandal over the lucrative business dealings of lawmakers from his Conservative Party. Mr. Johnson is not the only world leader whose global ambitions have been swamped by domestic distractions. Some, like President Biden, were hamstrung by political battles back home. Others, like President Xi Jinping of China, were no-shows as they struggled with the pandemic and other challenges. On Wednesday, Mr. Johnson tried his finest to vary the topic. "We have to pull out all of the stops if we're to do what we got here right here to do," he mentioned at an information convention earlier than the ultimate 2 days of the local weather convention, often known as 26 Colombian pesos. Mr. Johnson insisted a landmark deal was in attain, although he warned that a number of international locations have been falling wanting obligatory pledges. "Will you assist us grasp that chance, or will you stand in the best way?" he mentioned. The danger of sliding again can be an absolute catastrophe. Even in Glasgow, Mr. Johnson confronted as many questions on the scandal as he did about his efforts to fight local weather change. He was requested whether or not it was applicable for lawmakers to place their non-public pursuits forward of their constituents. He mentioned it was not, and whether or not he would apologize for the harm to the country's repute, he didn't. On stage, making an attempt to venture statesmanship to a worldwide viewers, he as a substitute discovered himself defending Britain's honour. The newest politician to return below scrutiny for moonlighting is Geoffrey Cox, a lawyer who's defending the British Virgin Islands in a corruption investigation introduced by the British authorities. Whereas Mr. Cox shouldn't be barred from training regulation, the Instances of London printed a video that advised he was advising his purchasers whereas taking breaks to forged votes in Parliament. The deputy head of the opposition Labour occasion, Rayner, mentioned she had referred Mr. Cox's case to the Parliament's Commissioner for Requirements, calling it an egregious, brazen breach of the principles. With a 79-seat majority in Parliament, Mr. Johnson's place is protected for now. However, analysts mentioned he risked alienating members of his occasion with a disaster largely of his personal making. It grew out of his government's misbegotten tri-final week to guard one other embattled Conservative lawmaker, Owen Paterson, by pressuring Tory lawmakers to vote in favour of rewriting Parliament's ethics guidelines. Not less than Mr. Biden made it to Glasgow. Mr. Xi of China, President Vladimir V. Putin of Russia and President Jair Bolsonaro of Brazil skipped the gathering, which local weather consultants mentioned lowered the chances of their international locations making a breakthrough dedication, even when they dispatched ample delegations to Scotland. Whereas the political storms in London weren't a lot of a subject within the hallways or assembly rooms in Glasgow, Mr. Burke mentioned they'd affirm the preconceptions of among the different leaders that Mr. Johnson shouldn't be a dependable counterpart. That might cut back their incentive to make extra far-reaching local weather pledges. "My sense is that he's seen as a lightweight,